Who does Dracula better, Gary Oldman or Leslie Nielsen? And more important, who has the better wig? Find out next as we watch Bram Stoker's Dracula and Dracula Dead and Loving It on Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night. Who's the more convincing hematologist, Anthony Hopkins or Mel Brooks? And what is a hematologist? All these questions will be answered, so stick around. Welcome, I'm Joe Bob Briggs, and this is the night of Draculas and vampires. You notice how if they want to make an artistic version of a horror film, they change the pronunciation? Count Dracula is a vampire in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the 1992 big-budget Francis Ford Coppola adaptation of the neck-biting, blood-sucking classic. And Mel Brooks was so impressed by this movie that he did a full-scale, big-budget parody of it called Dracula Dead and Loving It, starring Leslie Nielsen as the Count. And that's our second feature tonight when we go out to the trailer house a little bit later. I'll be here with you to follow the sinister Gary Oldman as he tries to give the lovely Winona Ryder an involuntary transfusion and lure her away from her boring boyfriend, Keanu Reeves, in what is probably the most faithful adaptation of the original 1897 novel ever filmed. Although, let's be honest, the standard has got to remain the 1931 version with Bela Lugosi. I'm sorry. And I have seen every Dracula movie ever made, about 160 of them, so don't even try to mess with me on this stuff. Some people still like the very first adaptation, that German silent thing, Nosferatu, in 1922. I can't watch that one. But actually, that wasn't the first adaptation. There was a 1921 movie, Hungarian, called Dracula. Nobody's seen it because they lost it. Bram Stoker's Dracula, starring Gary Oldman and Anthony Hopkins. Let's roll it. I'm not kidding. People think I'm making that up. Hungarian film, 1921. I've seen so many Dracula films that I know films that don't even exist. Film preservation, very important, especially in Budapest, Dracula's home country. They lost the film from Dracula, the first Dracula film from Dracula's home country. That is tragic. Gary Oldman apparently uses Oral Roberts' hairdresser, doesn't he? Going for sort of half camp, half serious, right? And he's using the same accent that Bela Lugosi used. That's a Lugosi accent. Now, if this was the 30s, we would say he was copying Lugosi, but since it's the 90s, we have to assume it's an homage to Lugosi, right? And Lugosi was Hungarian. It was his real accent. He used it in the 1927 production of Dracula on Broadway. And the accent should be close to the real historic Dracula because Transylvania is in northern Romania, but Hungarians live there. So it was because it was at one time part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So let's continue after the commercials with Francis Coppola's version of Bram Stoker's Dracula. I love the part where Anthony Hopkins shows up as Van Helsing. Technically, I want to be accurate tonight. This would be Jim Hart's version of Dracula, the screenwriter, the same screenwriter who wrote Hook. And technically, Anthony Hopkins was already in the movie. He was the priest who said Elisabetta was damned. He plays two parts in the movie. Do I miss a trick in this movie? Very rarely. That wasn't really a Lugosi accent. I wasn't trying, or a Gary Oldman accent. That was kind of a Count Floyd accent.
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night and Bram Stoker's Dracula after these messages.
Gary Oldman kind of gets a twinkle in his eye when he sucks the blood off that razor blade. Usually the movie is serious, but Coppola likes to put those little comedy things in there. Now, Bela Lugosi would never have done that. Actually, he did one comic Dracula one time in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And I think he regretted that because he was serious about this stuff. I'll tell you how serious he was. Bela Lugosi was buried in his Dracula cape with full Dracula makeup. And in fact, Bela is buried not far from where we're sitting right here. I would tell you where, but unscrupulous people might be tempted to desecrate. Not, and when I say Bela, I don't mean Bela Abzug. Bela Lugosi. Bela Abzug is buried in New Jersey or somewhere. Strangely enough, also in a cape with full Dracula makeup. See, that's why people get confused.
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night and Bram Stoker's Dracula after these messages.
What just happened there? Do you realize you could take any 3 minutes of this movie and put it to music and it would be a music video that could go into heavy rotation on MTV? But why does he go to England? Can he control people with his mind? Why? In the book, he doesn't go to England. Well, he does go to England, but only as a wolf. They're actually following the play. He goes to England in the play. In fact, the whole play is in England. Hamilton Dean wrote the play in 1912. The original book does begin in Transylvania and then shifts to England. The sole difference, really, the difference is in Dracula's appearance. And the fact that on the stage he's not a wolf, he's a gentleman. In the book he had like bad breath and hairy palms and sharp fingernails. And in the play he has a tuxedo and an opera cape and he looks like David Niven. So they're really going for the book and the play. Okay. Sorry. Oh, sometimes I forget where I am. Little strokes. It's okay, I'm back now.
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night and Bram Stoker's Dracula after these messages.
Do you know there are 38 different editions of this movie? Depending on whether you saw it in America or Europe or on premium cable or basic cable or free TV or you saw it in Pakistan or wherever, because Francis Ford Coppola keeps control of the editing of all his films, and he makes all these different versions. Actually, 39 versions now, counting this special late-night TNT version. This just came in yesterday. You know those 3 bodacious wives of Dracula? Francis wanted to show them naked on TNT. Ted said no to that. Ted said no. Anyway, too bad. Keanu Reeves wasn't struggling that much, was he? Those girls are Monica Bellucci, Michaela Bercu, and Florina Kendrick. Sounds like one Italian, one English, and one Romanian. Michaela Bercu sounds Romanian to me. I have a question, though. The White Wolf was in the same scene with Vlad, right? Yeah. But Vlad is the White Wolf. How? Why? You'd have to ask somebody at a Lost Boys reunion to get a straight answer to that, I guess.
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night and Bram Stoker's Dracula after these messages.
Okay, guys, who's the best Dracula? Lugosi? How many Dracula movies did he make? 1. I'm not counting Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, because that's, you know, he appeared as Dracula. It's not really a Dracula movie. He played many vampires, but only one Dracula. And his son of Dracula, in fact, was Lon Chaney Jr., and he actually played Count Alucard. Dracula spelled backwards, because they didn't want to be sued. Now, Christopher Lee did Dracula 11 times between 1958 and 1978. I think that's the record. Frank Langella, 1 movie, 1 play. Klaus Kinski. Now, talk about somebody who was born to be Dracula. 1 movie, though. Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, 1979. William Marshall. I stumped you, didn't I?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
1972. Who's William Marshall? Do you know?
No.
Blackula. I loved Blackula. You people. Gary Oldman, take it away.
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night and Bram Stoker's Dracula after these messages.
Whenever you hear Prince Vlad scream, like when he drove the sword into the cross, and in that last section where he was crying about getting the goodbye note from Mina and then he roared, whenever you hear that, it's actually the voice of Lux Interior, lead singer of the Cramps. Remember the Cramps?
Yeah.
I guess Lux was a good screamer. Okay, a few ads and then more movie. Sadie Frost, by the way, is the actress who plays the loose Lucy. They decided to dye her hair bright red because she looked too much like Winona Ryder. 2 leading ladies gotta have different colored hair. That's one of the rules.
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night and Bram Stoker's Dracula after these messages.
And so ends Tom Waits. Great performance by Tom Waits, the singer, as the insane servant of Dracula, Renfield. In most Dracula movies, they don't leave him in the cell the whole movie. Dracula breaks him out and he becomes his faithful slave. That's kind of difficult to do that whole role in the cell. Anyway, they're doing it again. They're saying vampire. He is vampire Nosferatu. Nosferatu is the old Slavonic word for plague carrier, a Romanian peasant word. Not really a big part of the original book. The only reason we know the word is that this German director named Murnau in 1922 wanted to make a movie version of Dracula without paying for the rights to Bram Stoker's widow, and so he used the word Nosferatu instead with the exact same story. And the widow of Bram Stoker did sue the guy for 3 years, but she never got any money. But the German film company was supposed to destroy all copies of that film. Fortunately for film history, a couple of them got loose, but the judge had told them to get rid of that film. Okay, back to Gary Oldman's very interesting interpretation of Dracula as a sort of, well, he has a little Bela Lugosi in there, like when he says, "Children of the night," and some Vincent Price, and some Charles Manson, and some Byron, and some Heathcliff, and some Satan. And of course, that's not counting the times he's a wolf or a bat or a zombie. And of course, in that first scene, he looked like Liberace at his funeral. So let's get back to the movie after this. Mixed reception from the critics. They said it was all over the lot. But I don't see it.
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night and Bram Stoker's Dracula after these messages.
Man, tough luck for Keanu. He is not getting his wife back, is he? Because there's something about a vampire man that satisfies a woman, even a proper English girl like Winona. Once you've had Drac, you'll never go back, right? When this movie came out, it did pretty well, but it wasn't the blockbuster everybody originally expected. And I think it's because people went, ooh, I really didn't expect Winona to be so into that. Kind of kinky, you know? Not as kinky as The Hunger, when Catherine Deneuve was the bisexual vampire with Susan Sarandon and David Bowie, but almost. Okay, let's see where this ends up. I'm not sure I can stand this, but it's a pretty dang exciting conclusion to Bram Stoker's Dracula. Winona Ryder is the person who made this movie possible, actually, when she read the script and she asked the screenwriter if she could personally take it to Francis Ford Coppola. She wanted this part because she thought it would make her a grown-up in people's eyes. Mission accomplished, Winona. Whoa!
More in a moment with Joe Bob's Hollywood Saturday Night and Bram Stoker's Dracula after these messages.
I'm Joe Bob Briggs, and if you thought Keanu Reeves was funny, wait till you watch our next movie, Dracula Dead and Loving It. Mel Brooks puts Leslie Nielsen in Gary Oldman's wigs and leaves gaps for the laughter. Otherwise, exact same movie. You know how movies like that happen, I think? Because of the concept of talent. You know what I mean? How come no matter how cynical they are, no matter whether they're producers or directors or actors or grips, or no matter how many horrible casting stories you've seen, they all still believe, no exceptions, in the concept of talent. I mean, some call it talent and some call it genius and some call it acting ability, but they all believe there's some mysterious quality that separates the good actor from the bad one. So when an actor goes to an audition and he doesn't get the part, you know, sometimes they're crushed because they say, I know I could do that part. I know I could do that better than anybody else. I know I could do that better than the guy they gave it to. And the point is, probably true. You probably could. But they gave it to some guy they had heard of because they think that by getting his name on the video box, they can sell more copies, even though the last hit he made was in 1981. And so he's just a name, but maybe it'll be worth a few bucks. And the fading star, you know, he may have a drinking problem. He may not even care about acting anymore, but it doesn't matter. And the producer doesn't care because they're not buying his acting, they're buying his name. So there's literally hundreds of examples of this, and yet that frustrated, aspiring actor still believes in the idea of being discovered. And what's even worse, the guy who keeps getting jobs on the basis of the old TV series thinks that he's being hired because of his talent. And the director thinks, wow, we got this talented guy because I've heard of him. The fact is, for every great Hollywood part, there are probably 500 guys laboring in university theaters and regional opera companies and community playhouses who could do it better than the star who's actually hired. And I think the audience even knows that. But what's amazing is Hollywood doesn't know that. I mean, Hollywood has to know that, right? They're around these guys all the time. Hollywood invented this system. But you've still got all these old cynical directors and producers talking about star quality. He had star quality, which, let's face it, star quality is half good looks and half good lighting, right? Yeah. Or they'll say performance of a lifetime, which means the star finally did something different from what she did in her last 10 movies, right? And that's special magic. That special magic usually means she's 17 years old, gorgeous and willing. Yeah. But of all the key players who combine to make a movie, the writer, the director, the cinematographer, the sound man, the art director, the editor, the composer, I would put the actors about 8th or 9th in order of importance, And as movies get more sophisticated and more visual, the actor's role diminishes more and more every day. But, it'll never diminish on the stage, of course. Because, but in film, you can sometimes do the same thing that the actor does with animation or effects or old footage. Robert Mitchum said it best. He said, Rin Tin Tin was the greatest actor Hollywood ever had. So my question is, why don't they just cut the crap? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Surely somebody does. All right, at least Mel Brooks got the casting right in our next flick, Dracula, Dead and Loving It. Leslie Nielsen, Harvey Korman, Amy Yazbek, who actually knows how to do an English accent. She does. You know the plot, so let's do the drive-in totals and get it started. We have 2 dead bodies, 2 undead bodies, 1 paper cut, 4 gallons of blood, skull crushing, multiple stair rolling, stake to the heart, hand burning, eye poking, fancy dancing, flaming Leslie Nielsen, and it's got some pretty funny stuff in it. So I give it 3 stars. Check it out. They have stopped putting Winona Ryder in period flicks, haven't they? I hope. She's doing Heathers too now. I don't mind that. I don't mind Andrew McCarthy in St. Elmo's Fire. I just don't want to see Andrew McCarthy in The Merchant of Venice. You guys know what I'm talking about? Sly Stallone. He's always complaining that nobody will cast him as a doctor or a lawyer. Sly, you're not a doctor. You're not a lawyer. They're not going to let you do King Lear even when you are an 84.